indeed. Now, students with disabilities here in the North West have warned that benefit changes may mean fewer of them going to university. The Disabled Students Allowance, DSA, helps pay for what they need, such as special software or accommodation. As Stuart Pollitt explains, the government's now asking universities themselves to take more responsibility for welfare.
Students have been on the streets over tuition fees, then over educational maintenance allowances, or EMA. So, could DSA be the next battleground?
Feel the leaves, you feel the individual leaflets. Yeah, beautiful. So very nice.
Christian is busy preparing the ground for a new garden at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston. He's studying for an environmental management degree, a degree which wouldn't be possible without DSA.
It's enabled me to actually come to university. I have received a lot of equipment from them and human support, such as a library assistant, note takers for my lectures, and a practical assistant who helps me with laboratory and field work.
Put that in your left hand and then you can still use my right as a guide.
OK, yep. I dread to think of the lives which will be ruined by students not having enough money to purchase the equipment to come and excel in a degree.
Without the DSA, I just wouldn't have been able to start the course.
Christian isn't alone in his concerns. Craig has spina bifida and is midway through a law degree.
The greatest concern people have is that you simply will not be able to come to university. People will be languishing on benefits. This is a cost to society.
Here's how the system works. Currently, students are entitled to up to £5,000 a year for specialist equipment, around £20,000 for non-medical helpers like note takers, and up to £1,750 for things like travel expenses. Students with anything from dyslexia through to blind and deaf undergraduates are tested to check if they're eligible. Last year, 53,000 students received DSA, costing nearly £120 million. The new president of Uclan Student Union was one of those who got support.
Students at Uclan will be massively affected. There's around 2,500 students who receive DSA on all different levels. I agree with the government looking upon DSA, but they shouldn't be cutting at it. They should be looking at reforming the whole DSA and actually thinking, right, well, how can we make it better? How can we make it more beneficial?
So students are worried, but there are implications too for universities who have been asked to supply more funding and take more responsibility for disabled students. The problem is the universities don't actually yet know exactly what's in store from these changes.
The detail from the government about which students will continue to receive DSA isn't really clear to us at this moment in time.
Are you going to have to provide more people like yourself to support? Have you any idea?
Well, one thing that's really clear from the announcements is that there is going to be a significant financial impact on Lancaster University and, in fact, on universities across the country when they try to deal with this change.
We're getting, I think, a better balance between the individual payment for the student and the obligation on the institution, and overall there will be more provision, more support for disabled. This is a better system for disabled because sometimes it all being done through an individual budget for the student is less efficient, and where there are extra individual needs of the student, of course Disabled Students Allowance will carry on.
OK, so that's your label now.
Yep.
Christian just hopes that's true and that by the time his garden flourishes, other students will continue to get the help he has had to help them flourish.
And we're joined now from London by Dr Nicola Martin from the National Association for Disability Practitioners, which represents people who work with students who need extra support. Nicola, thanks for being on the programme. Just outline what the problem is, what you're worried about.
The consultation period feels like it's not really a consultation at all. National Association of Disability Practitioners represents practically every university in the UK and includes people with expertise in promoting disability equality in post-school education. National Union of Students, obviously a whole wealth of expertise. And the announcement came in the spring as an absolute bolt out of the blue with no prior consultation. And we understand that consultation in the autumn will be about the clarity of procedures rather than whether the idea is any use in the first place.
Do you agree with the principle of it, though?
I think that disability practitioners are incredibly flexible people who've moved with the times as assistive technology has changed and everything else. And we're used to change, we're used to development, and DSA needs to be reviewed in some ways, but this period, having everything in place by 2015, is actually impossible. I used to be a principal lecturer for inclusive practice at Sheffield Hallam University, which was very, very forward-thinking. And in 8 years, we made some strides towards developing embedded inclusive practice, but not in any way enough that we would compensate for providing non-medical help support for disabled students who absolutely need something which is tailored to their individual needs.
OK, well, Nicola, let me bring in Eric Olorenshaw. You represent a university town, in fact. So what do you make of this, and particularly the criticisms there?
Well, I can understand the criticism and the worry about it, but, I mean, you can argue consultation, prior consultation. Consultation is actually going on, so the government is actually listening. But this allowance was agreed 25 years ago, hasn't been reviewed since. Obviously, 25 years ago, a computer might have been seen as a complex need, whereas now it's a bit more, it's a different kind of world.
What are you aiming, what are you trying to do?
Well, we're trying to find out the best way of helping the ones with the most complex needs into university. I mean, it has been successful in terms of delivering that, but given we agreed that universities could have an increase in fees, one of the principles behind that was that universities would also demonstrate they would have a wider access. So we want to see what universities are also doing in encouraging more and supporting disabled into the actual colleges and the courses, while at the same time, obviously, every single item of government expenditure has to be reviewed because we still haven't yet closed the deficit and dealt with the debt.
Andrew?
Well, if that was a correct analysis, what Eric is saying is that the massive increase and hike in fees that the Coalition have brought in is passing the cost of disabled students back to the student population. That cannot be right. This is a public duty, and it is hugely important that we shouldn't allow this clever smoke and mirrors exercise to continue, because what's happening, just as is happening in local government's been told to do more and more with less and less money. Universities now been told to do more and more with less and less money, and the victims in all this, in this case, are disabled students. That cannot be right. So I encourage every single disabled student to write to their MP and demand that the system is, yes, there can be a review, I'd fully agree with that, but let's make sure that it's based upon a fair set of rules that work for the 21st century.
Absolutely.
Can I come
But
in
how do you know it isn't?
Because there are case after case coming through, and I can see what would happen. Those institutes that have a significant number of people with disabilities will be asked to put their hands deeper in the pocket, so the ones that have been most progressive will be the biggest losers. That can't be right.
I can't see that.
Dr Martin, you wanted to come back in.
Yes, please. Exactly. It is an issue of equity. It will mean that disability services within universities will be the equivalent of a postcode lottery. Some universities will be much better placed to support disabled students, and disabled students themselves will be seen as a direct cost to university, which may well limit recruitment. There'll also be a perceived a feeling that support is going to be less readily available to disabled students, which is going to limit them in terms of deciding to go to university. And also it's incredibly short term, because we know 70% of disabled graduates access employment, are employed people, and 40% of disabled people who are not graduates are in employment. So it's
okay,
really... but we're assuming it's going to happen. I mean, what you're assuming, there's a consultation going on. And as I said, this disability allowance was agreed 25 years ago in totally different circumstances. The universities have got more money coming in, so there must be a trade-off in terms of this across the board between universities and individuals. And if it means we can concentrate more money on the more severely disabled, then presumably we can increase accessibility.
What do you make of that?
In terms of the notion of complex needs and directing support to students with the most complex needs, that in itself is going to be a cost in terms of working out how you define complex and how the assessment will be conducted. That can't be changed within 12 months in a very, very easy way. And I would argue, for example, my research is with students with autism at the University of Cambridge. Very, very brilliant young people in a very, very complex environment, which renders their needs complex by definition. So although we're being consulted, it's really about the clarity of the process rather than actually how the system is going to operate in practice.
Okay.
And it's certainly an issue of equity across
Dr. Nicola
universities.
Martin, thank you very much indeed for your time.